My Ipid head, Robert McBride, I was telling you, has wrapped up his testimony at the state capture inquiry. That's where he detailed the system of patronage in the police service. McBride says unless patronage is dealt with, the exploitation of the police will continue unabated. Let's take you live now to our reporter, Aaron Bates, who's been tracking the State Capture Commission of Inquiry. Aaron, so how did the system of patronage work?
Well, Timbekile, what Robert McBride has said is that there's a culture of patronage within the police service, and some of that relates to how officers are promoted. For example, pleasing their seniors and then being bumped up in the ranks of the blue brass, the police service in South Africa. He's also spoken about the history of the service, describing it as one of the oldest organizations in the country in one form or another, and saying that on the whole the service is highly resistant to the sort of transparency and accountability which is provided for and enforced really in law in the Constitution. And if this doesn't change, he says, both criminal syndicates, highly organized criminal syndicates, and politicians will exploit the system of patronage to their own end.
Has he given any indication as far as names are concerned, Aaron, of who the individuals are who are spearheading this campaign that has now placed the police service in this country at such detriment?
Well, certainly McBride has mentioned a number of names of senior officials, not only within the police service, during his testimony. When it comes to the question of patronage, he spoke rather broadly and rather generally about trends he observed, but he has repeatedly mentioned former police minister Nathi Nhleko in his testimony. He's also spoken, for example, about Advocate Sean Abrams, the former head of the National Prosecuting Authority, and then the Deputy Commissioner in the Northwest, a Major General, in fact, Mabula, who McBride accused of leading up a team that was relocated from that province to Gauteng, and then on McBride's allegations, paraded as Ipid officials, engaged with witnesses over a matter investigating the then acting National Police Commissioner, Khomotso Phatlane, and then got those witnesses to change their statements. Now, the same Mabula, who was at one point up to be Provincial Commissioner of the Northwest, has been accused of being on site during the torture of an accused in police custody, and the same former Deputy Commissioner of the Northwest, Mabula, is accused of being privy to police officers committing torture, and in one case an accused is alleged to have died in police custody while he was in that deputy senior position.
So as he concludes his evidence, Robert McBride, the morning did start off with quite a big news story coming out of there. That is the former SARS Commissioner, Tom Moyane, basically losing his application to cross-examine the Public Enterprises Minister, Pravin Gordhan. Where did Moyane fall short?
Well, what the chairperson, Deputy Chief Justice Raymond Zondo, did for a large part of the first hour of this morning's proceedings is go through the requirements in terms of applications to cross-examine witnesses per the regulations and rules of the Commission of Inquiry. There are certain thresholds or requirements that an applicant to cross-examine a witness must meet in order to have a viable application for cross-examination. And on several fronts, in fact, all of but one theme, Zondo said that Moyane's applications fell short of those requirements. So it was on those thresholds, really, that Moyane failed. However, there is a slight gap, a slight window here for him, in that Zondo said there was one matter that worried him, that he was concerned about, and he was going to ask both Moyane and the Public Enterprises Minister, Pravin Gordhan, to make submissions on before he makes a final decision. And that's over Gordhan's mention of charges that Moyane instated against him and an intimation in Gordhan's submissions that Moyane did so maliciously. Zondo saying that there seemed to be an equivocation over 27 questions that the former finance minister was required to answer, and these charges instated by Moyane. And Zondo wanted to clarify some of those concerns before making a decision. So while for the most part Moyane's application to cross-examine the Public Enterprises Minister has been thrown out, there is a tiny gap of opportunity if he and his counsel can put together satisfactory submissions to the chair.
And lastly, Aaron, just on those gaps of opportunity, is there any way in which Tom Moyane could challenge this decision that has now been reached by the Commission?
Well, certainly, as I stand before you now, I'm not aware of any provisions in the rules or the regulations that prohibit someone from raising concerns about a decision by the chair. But in terms of the deliberations that we heard from Zondo this morning on those thresholds, which are clearly stipulated in the rules and regulations, I think it's unlikely that any such appeal would be that successful. The real gap here, to me at least, seems to be that final pending issue that Zondo raised, over which he seeks submissions from both Moyane and Gordon. And interestingly, I think this is quite an important point, Tembekile, on the submission from Moyane that the findings of the Nugent Commission into his work, or Moyane's work at SARS, Moyane's counsel, Advocate Dali Mpofu, arguing that those findings that Nugent made were inadmissible altogether and irrelevant to the work of the Commission because that they were found under a different set of rules and regulations. That Commission had a separate mandate, effectively. Zondo taking issue with that and saying he could not agree with Moyane's argument there, saying while he wasn't bound by the finding of Nugent's report, which was sent to the President and really kick-started Moyane's final exit from SARS, Zondo said that if those findings relate to the work of the Commission, if they're in the interests of the inquiry that he needs to pursue, then he may look and will look at the Nugent report on Tom Moyane.
ENC reporter Erin Bates live for us in Parktown, the venue for the State Capture Commission of Inquiry.